kind of ending that, going to just do this. Can we just welcome our family, our guests, live, online, and out at Seven Lakes? Grace, let's welcome our parents. Amen. Now, today's a special day for me. My pastor, Michael Fletcher from the Manna Church in Fayetteville. I met Michael in 1978, so that tells you a long time ago. I moved to Fayetteville, Fort Bragg with the military, started attending this church in Fayetteville, and met this kind of nerdy kid back then, going to Bible college. I got out of the military, started going to Bible college. Michael ended up becoming the senior pastor at Manna Church. After graduating from Bible college, Michael sent my wife and I and one family and a single girl out for the first church plant of Manna Church to start Grace Church in Southern Pines. Back then they were about 350 people. Now they're multiple, big church, multiple sites. Michael, why don't you come on up? All right, let me tell you about Michael, and He's not going to tell you all the things that he's going to.
By the way, I was 5 when we met. I just want to let you know that. So he's going to drag all that stuff up.
Yeah. I'm actually a month or so older than he is, by the way. But so we've been doing ministry literally for a long time. Planted churches together. We planted churches out of here. They've planted churches, trained leaders, put churches all over the world, partnered with them. They partner with us. We have seen here at the Southern Pines campus thousands of people come to Christ. They have seen millions of people come to Christ. The number of leaders, world impact. Michael's into multiply. First of all, he had 8 children. All right. He's written 8 books. Has how many grandchildren?
25 and a half grandchildren.
25 and a half grandchildren.
And he's pregnant. What can I say? Can't leave that one out.
But guys, this is my pastor, who we've been doing life and ministry together for basically the last, even though we weren't pastors then, 40 years. 35 starting Grace Church. I was on staff with him, sent us out or kicked us out. One of the two, we haven't figured that out. But guys, could you welcome my lifelong friend, Pastor Michael Fletcher.
Hey, let's give a bigger hand for your pastor and friend, leader. Come on, Pastor Randy. How y'all doing? You look good. So I want to talk today along the lines, the theme of an unexpected divine appointment. And I think it's really my life story, but it's not just mine, it's yours too, and you'll see that as we get into it. But I want to start with a story. It's a true story. Now, you know it's a bad day when the preacher has to tell you that the story's true, because pastors lie so much, right? But that's not the reason. It's not because we're all a bunch of liars. This is a pretty exceptional story. And you'll see. And the reason I'm telling it is because it segues perfectly into what I have for our message today. So on July 2nd, 1982, a pilot of a 737 commercial jetliner coming into LAX, Los Angeles International Airport, he radioed the tower, and he told the tower that he believed he had seen what might be described as a UFO, unidentified flying object. And when the tower asked the pilot to identify, to explain it, what did you see? What did it look like? He said it appeared to be a man sitting in a lawn chair holding a rifle. You're wondering if you're saying that's not true. He's a liar. He's going to set us up. This is a joke. This is a true story. In fact, you can look it up later. He's called Lawn Chair Larry. Don't look it up now during the message. You'll miss it. You'll miss too much of the good stuff. You can just look it up later, or you can just trust me. So this guy, this truck driver, Larry Walters, decided he wanted to get a better view of his neighborhood and a better perspective on his own life. So he had this idea. He'd go to the Army surplus store and buy some weather balloons. Now, if you know those old-fashioned weather balloons, those things can hold some weight. So instead of just buying 5 or 6 of them, he bought all they had. He bought 75 weather balloons. The idea was that he and his neighbor were going to take the helium and blow up the water balloons, the weather balloons, connect them to the lawn chair, and then tie the lawn chair with the weather balloons to the back of the pickup truck. You knew there had to be a pickup truck involved there someplace, but I drive one, so I can't judge myself. Anyway, so anyway, the idea was at the right time, the neighbor would take the knife and cut the rope, and lawn chair Larry would float up gently over his neighborhood with the pellet gun in his lap. So the idea was when he got to a certain height, he could just shoot the number of pellets into the weather balloon, and it would kind of stabilize it. And then when he's ready to come back down, he could shoot some more. They could come back. It would come all the way to planet Earth. Just float gently over his neighborhood. So he was going to be there a while. He had a pellet gun. That was part of the necessary equipment. He had a peanut butter sandwich, and he had a six-pack of beer. Also, obviously, essential. It gets better. So when lawn chair Larry gave him the signal, his neighbor the signal, he cut the rope, and instead of floating up gently over his neighborhood, he shot up like a rocket. At 2,000 feet, he passed out, but not until the first thing he did when he realized what was going on, he cracked open the six-pack of beer. I'm not lying to you. He cracked open the six-pack of beer and began to drink. At 2,000 feet, he passed out. At 16,000 feet, that's where the pilot of the 737 commercial airliner saw him. The funniest part about it, though, to me, is this. When they finally got lawn chair Larry back down to planet Earth, they fined him $1,500. Is there like an ordinance in LA that you can't fly your lawn chair over a certain... Why would you find the guy? I mean, he's alive. He got away with his life. I guess maybe to discourage other people from doing the same thing. But interestingly enough, if you look him up, you're going to find out there are many copycats that have tried it. Dumb as a box of rocks, I'm saying. When the local reporter finally got a hold of him, asked him why he did it, he said this. He said, I just want to get a better perspective on my life, and I got tired of always sitting around. I think sometimes we have similar questions. I think sometimes we wonder if what we're doing and where we are in life, if it's going to count for eternity. I mean, I'm going to say this a number of times throughout the message, but I'll start with it right now. You go to heaven based on what Jesus did for you on the cross. But your reward there is based on what you did in this life with what you were given. And I think sometimes as believers we intrinsically understand that. There's a knowledge we get from the scripture, but there's something we carry around. And every now and then we tap into it it's a sense of purpose or destiny. Like it dawns on you, I'm made for something. God made me on purpose for a purpose. I'm not here by accident. God didn't just put human material into a machine that cranks out people. He handcrafted me. He handcrafted you. And when we hear messages like the one I'm getting ready to share with you, words that came out of Jesus' mouth, words that were penned by the Apostle Paul, it causes us sometimes to stop and to sit back and ask questions, not just of what we're doing out here, but where are we? Do we understand our potential? Do we understand our calling? We have a sense of that. Does this really count? That's why we gravitate towards sermons and books and stuff that says God can change the world through you. And you go, I think that's true because there's something in you, the spirit that God put there that earnestly says, yes, it is true. Randy referenced Bible college, and I put myself through Bible college working at UPS. So every morning, we had to be at work at 3 until it was Christmas time, and then all y'all people buying all those boxes made me had to be at work at 2 a.m. Shame. Anyway. We were the preloaders. In other words, we're the people that got the boxes out of the big semi and into the package cars to get to your neighborhood, to a place where you live, and deliver it to you. We weren't delivery guys. We were perfect morning job. We're done at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, start at 3:30, done at 7, go get a shower, go to class. Perfect, go to school job. We had a little carpool. It was kind of like a little small group. Tom Seifert, his wife Karen, but she wasn't, of course, in the car. Tom Seifert, Fidel Jimenez, who was retired from the military, all those great Vietnam stories he would regale us with. And so it was a great time, 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back every single day. Tom's real passion was for his wife. for one unique reason. It's not going to seem unique when I first share, but you'll see. She just felt called to be a mom. And because she felt called to be a mom, they kept trying to get pregnant. And she'd already had, by this time, 4 or 5 miscarriages. So Tom got in the car one day. We're going to go to work, and he says, guys, Karen's pregnant. So Fidel and I, we put on our best face. Here we go. We're going to pray this through. It's going to work this time. And he said, good news, we waited till the first trimester was over, so we're doing good. That encouraged us a little bit. So we prayed. Every day we prayed. And she went to her faithful to her appointments. And because of her circumstances, she had a higher op tempo of appointments than other people might have. So she was in for one of her many visits toward the end, in month number 9, and the doctor said, something's wrong here. I need you to get to the emergency room immediately. So she went straight to the emergency room, had an emergency C-section. They named the boy Jesse. He was immediately taken out of the NICU, out of the emergency room and brought to the NICU, which are not, back in those days, anywhere close to what they are today. So they went to work on little Jesse. As it turns out, every day Karen would go visit and pray and put her hand on the glass, but never touched him until his 3rd day. The doctor came and said, we've done all we can do. And she handed him to Karen as she held her 3-day-old boy, and he breathed his last. I went to 2 different Bible colleges, and both places required systematic theology, so I had an inordinate supply of systematic theology in my training. As a matter of fact, I taught systematic theology in our Bible college. Now it's Manna University for 25 years. So that when the funeral came, I was heartbroken. And I was too smart to be angry because I knew that wasn't going to go anywhere, but I got right up on the edge of it. And I'm going to share some things, by the way, in this message that you could legitimately judge me for. But remember, I was in my 20s. So there I was, and I was crying. I was crying for Jesse. But this time I had a couple of kids myself. And my best time of the day would be when I'd come home and they'd come running, screaming, Daddy, 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 and throw their arms around my legs and hug my legs. And I would pat them on the back, and then we'd end up wrestling and stuff. And Laura would say, look, you got all that UPS junk all over you. Go clean up before you. Anyway. And I just said, Lord, he's never going to have. Jesse's never going to have. He's never going to have the chance to run up and grab his dad around his legs and say, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. He's never going to see a sunrise. He's never going to see a sunset. He's never going to walk on a beach or see a mountain. Why now? Why not take him in the first trimester? Why wait till now? Why? What purpose is gained from this? And yet somehow in the back of my mind, I knew the answer to that. Everybody was created on purpose for a purpose. This little guy, though he's 3 days old, had a purpose. I just couldn't figure out what it was. I was just overwhelmed by the seeming injustice of it all. And then God spoke these words to me. And this is why it's my unexpected divine appointment. He said to me, Jesse has already heard, well done, thou good and faithful servant, but yours is yet to be spoken. Let me say that again. Jesse has already heard from Jesus, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a little, I'll make you ruler over much. Enter the joy of the Lord. He's already heard that. Yours is yet to be spoken. You ever hear from God and God just drops in maybe a couple of words or half a sentence or maybe a whole sentence into your heart, but it has like a whole encyclopedia of meaning. You know what I'm talking about? So there I was, and when he spoke that to me, all of a sudden, these verses that I'd known for years just began to tumble one right in front of the other in my own heart and mind. Here, like for instance, this one out of Luke chapter 12, verse 48. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much is required. And from him to whom they've entrusted much, they will demand the more. See, and there's the problem. There was the problem for me. Because as a young 20-something-year-old Bible college guy, I wanted to change the world. I mean, I wanted to write books. I wanted to travel and do ministry in places where no one's been there before. I wanted to reach the hardest people on the planet. I wanted to plant churches. I want to be an apostle. I want to oversee a movement of churches. I want to be there. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, wait a minute, the more God gives you, the more responsible you are. You got to answer for that. Jesse had a 3-day life. He heard, well done. He had accomplished his mission. And I started thinking about that. And I started praying. I said, Lord, I want to undo all the prayers I prayed. I'm going to trade them back in. All I need is one tiny little ministry. Just something small is fine. And I'll just put all my energy into that, and I'll glorify you in that way. And then when I die, you're going to say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. But I think I bit off more than I can chew. And God didn't have to say another word because I knew in my heart that stuff's already been downloaded. You didn't get to choose the stuff to start with. The Bible says God puts the gifts in you according to his design. So there's not a checklist. You go, I'll take that one. I don't want that. There's not a checklist. It's given by God. I thought to myself, remember this. You go to heaven based on what Jesus did for you on planet Earth on the cross. But your reward in heaven is based on what you did with what you were given while you were on this planet. Let me say that again. You get to heaven based on what Jesus did for you on the cross, but your reward when you get there is based on what you did with what you were given here in this life. See, if you read the Bible carefully, there are 2 judgments at the end. There's a great white throne judgment. That's where God separates the sheep from the goats. The sheep, those who are believers, trusting in Jesus Christ, go to heaven when they die. The goats who've spurned and rejected Jesus, they go to another place where they suffer for eternity. Then there's a believer's judgment. It's called the Bema seat. Bema is a Greek word which means judge. And it's there where you come and stand before Jesus and he gives you your reward. So I'm going to go through 2 judgments. Number 1, because I'm a believer. So the great white throne, turns out I'm a sheep, praise God. Not because of what I did, because of what he did. Pastor Randy's going to come at the end. If you don't know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, he's going to give you a chance to meet him today. He's in this place. He'd love to meet you. Second judgment's the Bema seat. See, that's where Jesus says to you, hey, when I was thirsty, you came and gave me something to drink. When I was hungry, you came and you fed me. When I was in prison, you came and visited me there. And that's where you're going to respond. If you read the scripture, even when it's outlined by Jesus, it seems that it catches everybody off guard. And so you go, well, Lord, oh, no, that's not me. I didn't live during your time frame. I lived in a totally different century. So I didn't live anywhere close to when you, so I never gave you water. I never fed you. I mean, I got a little tiny prison ministry that was me and some guys started, but you were never in there. I mean, you're a prisoner? I didn't even know that. And Jesus says, no, you got it all wrong. To the extent that you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a little, I'll make you ruler over much. Yeah, and that's what I want. That's what I want. I want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Then I started crying for me. As I realized I can't get out of this. And I know God's not looking for, I mean, I could sense it heavy. I know God was not looking for a flippant little answer from a pig-headed, prideful little 20-something-year-old Bible college student. Yeah, okay, God, I got it. It was deeper than that. He was asking me. It was a divine appointment. It was a meeting with God. It was something I knew I couldn't just immediately say. This verse became my life verse. It's something Paul said out of Acts chapter 20, verse 24. However, I consider my life worth nothing to me. That's a good start, Paul. It isn't about you. It's about God. It's about your family. It's about others. It's about how you treat your enemies. It's about a lot of things. But one thing's for certain, it's not about me and it's not about you. It's bigger than that. However, I consider my life worth nothing to me. These 2 words crushed me, if only. if only I may finish the race. Now, when you see that phrase, race, that word used in that way in the New Testament, it's about the Christian life. It's about the journey that God called you on. It's about the path that's in front of you. It's about your purpose. And good news and bad news. Good news, your purpose is not fulfilled. I know that because if it were, you wouldn't be here. And there's the bad news. You'd die right in the seat. That would not be good. Don't do that. Go to heaven later, but not now. I thought that was funny. However, I consider my life worth nothing to me, if only I may finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me. And he knew what a task was, the task of testifying to the gospel of God's grace. And I looked at that and said, wait a minute. Paul wrote most of the epistles in the New Testament. Listen, I've studied Paul. You can ask Randy. I've been on footsteps trip where we followed the footsteps of Paul. I did 2 of those. I've read I should teach a course on Paul. I read all the stuff, all the key books out there on Paul. It's amazing. This guy he's the man. And here in this verse, he's on his way. These are his words. He's near the end of his life. This isn't the beginning. He's not in Bible college here. This is the end of his life. He's going to skirt by Ephesus. He wants to meet with the elders from Ephesus, so he calls them. They come out to Miletus. He meets with them there, and he goes over all the stuff that he did with them and how he treated them. And one of the things he says is this to these people. Soon he's going to go. He's going to be put in prison. He'll be in prison for 2 years. You read that in the book of Acts, the last chapter. He'll be in prison for 2 years. He'll be chained to a Praetorian, which was like the best soldiers in the Roman Empire were Praetorians. They protected Caesar's family, and they also took guys that were like political prisoners like Paul, and they held them unchained. So they literally be chained to them. That's why Paul says, some of Caesar's household greets you. Say, why would they greet us? Had they become believers? Yes, because the Praetorians rotated. Sometimes they were with Paul, all chained up. He led them to Christ. Then they'd be released from their chains. Paul's chained to somebody else. Then they would be among the family. They shared their faith with the family, and people in Caesar's household got born again. Pretty cool, huh? So he had those 2 years. He had those 2 years. And he's talking to these guys. This is the end of his life. He's close to it. 2 years plus 2, and I'll talk about that second 2. So he's 4 years away from dying for his faith. And he says, if only I may finish the race. Paul, if you can't finish the race, or if you're asking that question, that's why the Lord speaks to my Lord spoke to my heart. That's why I'm talking to you about this now. If only I may finish the race. I knew that God was looking for one life-altering decision. It was my time to pony up. I remember my wife sent me to Food Line to get some stuff. Maybe milk, cheese, lettuce. I'm not exactly sure what was on the list, but it was that. By the way, let me interrupt myself to say, ladies, I want to speak on behalf of the men for a minute. We have this covenant with God. We can't help ourselves. It's like a covenant with God. When we go in the grocery store, you send us there, we are obliged to come back with beef jerky. Come on, guys, help me out. With beef jerky, with all kinds of stuff. That stuff literally jumps off. It jumps out of the ice cream thing and into the basket. I didn't touch it, swear to God. It was just there. Boom, it just happened. Am I telling the truth, guys? You're okay. All right, I'm rating the services here. The most courageous service was the 9:30 people. They just owned it. The 18 people were looking at each other and looking at their wives. I swear, I don't know what you're talking about. He's not one of us. And y'all are kind of in the middle. I was kind of thinking y'all would be the party crowd. Anyway, don't judge us when we come home with extra stuff. If you don't like that, send your teenage son. He's too scared to bring home extra stuff. Even though dad says out the door, get me some beef jerky. Kid looks at you like you're an alien. I ain't going to do that. She'll kill me. So there's not much calorie and fat in beef jerky. I'm just saying. One life-altering decision. So there I was in the parking lot. And I know, I mean, looking back, I see how crazy I look. There's this 20-something-year-old man. He's got his hands on the car, just looking like I just vomited, looking down at the earth, because I'm wrestling with it. What are you going to do, Michael? How far are you going to take this Christian thing? You're just going to go get a little Bible college degree, come back, do nice things? Or are you going to be who I called you to be and do what I called you to do? I need you to decide. And I remember slamming the door. I slammed the door, bam, and I made the decision. I will not be mediocre. I'm going to die in here. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. If my wife doesn't want to go all the way with God, I love her to death. I'll die for her. But if she doesn't want to go all the way, I'm going to go all the way. I'm going all the way. If my children say, Dad, that's a little too radical. You love God too much. I'm going to go all the way. If my friends say that's a little too much, you're loving God too much, you're loving others too much, I'm going to go all the way. There's somebody else in here beside me. One life-altering decision. By the way, it didn't dawn on me till years later. This is kind of like a little insert. It didn't jump into my head until a few years later. I was remembering Jesse and how Jesse changed my life. How a 3-day-old boy changed my life, and then it dawned on me. Let me just make it personal to you. If you get anything out of this message, my life was partially shaped by a 3-day-old boy. So if you get anything from this message, Jesse is in heaven collecting reward on this message today. Wow. All the churches we planted, all the risks we took, all these years where God blessed it, that goes to Jesse's account. 3 days old. 3 days old. That goes to his account. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24. Do you not know that in a race all the runners compete, but only one receives the prize? Now, he's not trying to get us to run against each other. That's not the point here. I don't have time to develop that, but it's just not the point here. In other words, my race is my race, not your race. Don't get encouraged or condemned by my race. And I won't get condemned or discouraged by your race. Your race is not the same as his, and your race is not the same as hers. You've got to own, you are handcrafted by God on purpose for a purpose. And it doesn't have to be something magnificent in the eyes of people. It's magnificent in the eyes of God when it's done by faith. When you stand there and say, I gave a cup of water, or I gave something to eat, or I visited. I didn't move into the prison. I visited you in prison, and I helped you out. Well, I stopped on the side of the road and gave you ... Whenever that you did it for them, you did it for me, and I count that as part of your reward. I'm not saying here you got to go out and do grandiose things in the eyes of the world. You just got to do what God's called you to do, and be who God's called you to be. He says, do you not know that in a race all the runners compete, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, a gold medal. But we an imperishable one, lasts forever. So I do not run aimlessly, and I do not box like one beating the air. He changes analogies there. But I discipline my body, and I bring it under control, lest, watch this now, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. You know what Paul is saying? He's saying, I don't want my life to end before my race is over. I don't want my life to end before my race is over. I want to run my race. You know, if Jesus walked in the door right now and said, Michael, what do you want for these people? I'll give it to you. Here's what I would tell him. I would say, Lord, I want them to live a full life. And at the end of it, I want their family gathered around them. So you can speak blessings over them. And then I want them to close their eyes and fade away into your arms. And I want them to hear you say to them, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a little. I'll make you rule over much. You remember the parable where the guy's got 5 talents and another guy's got 2 talents? And talent isn't like you can play guitar. Talent's a measurement of money. It's an investment. God is saying, I made an investment in you when I saved you. I'm expecting a return. So 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent. The guy who's got 5 talents, he puts them to work, turns around, and now there are 10 talents. He doubled it. There are 2 different parables that are similar. This is one of them. So the other guy has 2 talents, and he puts it to work, comes back, there's 4. He doubled it. And there's one who buries it into the field. and his reward is taken away and given to the guy with 10. And you say, why give it to the guy with 10? I mean, he's already got it. Maybe we should give it to the guy with 4. It just proves that God's Republican. Now let that sink in a minute. And do not write nasty letters to Randy. Because all the Democrats think I just dissed the Republicans, and all the Republicans just think I dissed the Democrats, and the Libertarians are sitting there happy. No, they get the same reward. He had 5, he had 2. The reward's the same. The one who buried it didn't get a reward, lost it. Paul is saying, I don't want to die before my race is done. Acts chapter 20, verse 24. However, I consider my life worth nothing to me. This is Paul again. If only I may finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me, the task of testifying to the gospel of God's grace. How did that turn out in his life? Is there a portal in the New Testament anywhere where we could peek through and see what happened with Paul? Actually, yes. See, most people think that Paul's story ended in the last 2 chapters of the book of Acts, Acts 28, where he was held in house arrest, chained to Praetorian guards, rotated. He was released after 2 years. Most scholars believe he traveled as far as Spain in the next 2 years. Eventually, he was arrested by Nero. He's taken to Mamertine prison. I've been to Mamertine prison. It is dark, it is dank, it is a terrible place. It's small. Many scholars believe that Peter was in that place with him for a period of time, in that same prison. They shared that same prison. Actually, he also pens his last epistle from that prison. If you look in, don't do it now, but if you go home and you read in 2 Timothy chapter 4, it's very personal. It's a different kind of man. He's the same guy, but he says things like, hurry and come to me and bring the cloak I left in such and such. In other words, I'm cold. This prison is cold. Bring the parchments, the studies, the stuff I've been writing. Bring that. And watch out for this guy. He did me much harm. And watch out. Oh, and John Mark. Remember Paul and Barnabas broke apart over John Mark. And now Paul's saying, bring him to me. It's a very personal moment. And here's what he says in verse 6. For I'm already being poured out as a drink offering. My life. Being poured out as a drink offering means I'm dying. It says I'm being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I've fought the good fight. I've finished the course. Another translation says I finished the race. I've kept the faith. See, that's what I want for you. I want you to get to the end of it all and look back over a very non-perfect life, which we all share, where we stumble and fall and sin from time to time and do stupid things. But for the most part, our hearts are passionately aimed toward God and his people and his mission, not just our gain and comfort. Paul says, I fought the good fight. I've finished the course. I've kept the faith. In the future, which means when he's dead, not now, when he's dead, probably in the next couple of weeks. In the future, there's laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. Notice he says righteous judge. The word there is bema. Bema seat, that's the believer's judgment. I'm going to read this verse 8 again because I want to make a point for you. I fought the good fight. I've finished the course. I've kept the faith. In the future, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. Here's the good news. Ready? And not only me, but also to all who loved his appearing. In one stroke of the pen, Paul included us into his own story. And he said, if I can make it, you can make it. Again, you go to heaven. Jesus has done the heavy lifting. You go to heaven based on what Jesus did for you on the cross. It's your reward that you're after. Your reward is based on what you did with what you were given. So what are you prepared to do? There's a movie I want to borrow from that I can't recommend. It's called The Untouchables. I can't recommend it because of the language and violence. So don't watch it, just trust me. It's about the infamous Al Capone, the mafia head who owned Chicago. The story is somewhat true, actually. The Untouchables is the name of it. Elliot Ness was a true Treasury agent, worked for the Treasury Department. The movie's wrong in that he didn't carry a gun. Matter of fact, hate to ruin the movie, but Al Capone was actually brought down not by a sword, but by the pen. Elliot Ness was actually an accountant, and he got him for tax evasion. But the movie goes where Kevin Costner is Elliot Ness, the State Department agent and Treasury agent, and he tried to arrest Capone, but he failed. And so he's on a bridge, and he's despondent, leaning over the bridge, and here comes this beat cop, this guy who's got too much age not to be a captain or a lieutenant. Man, what you find out is that he used to be all those things, but he got broken down, because he was one of the untouchables. In other words, he wouldn't kowtow to Capone. And so he's played by Sean Connery. You can hear that wonderful Irish brogue. He comes up and says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Well, I had a terrible day." "How bad was your day?" "Well, I didn't arrest Al Capone." He laughed and he said, "You thought you were going to arrest him. You can't arrest him because he owns the whole city. Every cop is in his payroll." The Costner looks at him and says, "Is that you? Are you on the take as well?" "No, I'm an untouchable. That's why I have no rank. That's why I'm out here in the middle of the night as a beat cop. Because I won't break." So they made a coalition. It's true they did. They made a coalition. They were sarcastically called the Untouchables because they were clean, and they brought Capone down. But in the movie, there are certain key moments where we're kind of being like a sage or a father to Kevin Costner, to Elliot Ness. Sean Connery sometimes says, "What are you prepared to do?" Elliot Ness he's young, he's impetuous. We're going to bust that thing open, we're going to arrest him, we're going to put him in jail. What are you prepared to do? You realize that once you make this decision, everything about your life is going to change. This is not a decision, Elliot Ness, that you make without great forethought. You need to, just like me, leaning in my car, you need to decide, what are you prepared to do? All throughout the movie, that question's asked. So I'm asking you, you got a calling. If you're still alive, it's active. He really, really wants to say, "Well done" to you. He's loaded the New Testament with stories about how this works. He really, really loves you, and he really, really wants to say, "Well done."